Alrighty, hey everybody, we are live here just outside of East Palestine. We're technically just over the state line over in Darlington, Pennsylvania. If you're just joining us right now, let us know that you can see us by pressing the like button down below. Feel free to leave comments throughout. And at the end, if there are any super chats, we will definitely be getting to all of those. Happy to be joined by four folks here who are kind enough to sit down with us ahead of a county commissioners meeting here over in Darlington, Pennsylvania, where they're going to be announcing, deciding how some of the funds from Norfolk Southern are going to be dispersed on the PA side of things over here in Beaver County. First, just to let everybody do a little bit of an introduction, kind of introduce who you are, where you're from, and kind of your current state of affairs. You can keep it short for now. We'll get into the details after that. Juju, you can go ahead first.
Hi, thanks for having us, and thanks for coming out. My name is Zuja Jenis. I'm from East Palestine, Ohio. I'm also here tonight to support family in Pennsylvania. Still displaced in a hotel. I can no longer go back to my home in Ohio because of the derailment.
I'm Amanda Kemmer. I live in Darlington, Pennsylvania, and I am currently in my home.
My name is Sherry Mackenstein. I am here advocating for Darlington, PA, mostly the elderly, which is my family.
I'm Christina Seisloff. I'm from South Beaver Township, Pennsylvania, and I'm still in my home.
Great. And again, thank you all for taking the time. Some of you might remember some of these faces. We've had Juja for interviews before, as well as Christina. Thank you both for joining us for the first time, too. To kind of get things started here, it's now been 6 months since the derailment, since the detonation of vinyl chloride in East Palestine, which again is just over the border here. What are the top concerns for folks 6 months out? What are the things that you're most worried about at this point in time that you're trying to deal with at this point? Whoever wants to jump in first, feel free.
I'd say testing. We still are asking for testing, whether it's medical testing or testing of our water, soil, air. We're still looking for the government to step up and get that testing done for us. And as far as medical monitoring, we're looking to get lifetime medical monitoring from Norfolk Southern for those of us in the affected areas, not just in the 1 mile imaginary zone.
Right.
We're looking for that lifetime monitoring, I would say up to 5 miles, even further possibly.
Right.
As far as the plume went, looking for that medical monitoring for those of us that were affected, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm assuming, is testing a concern of others here as well?
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think she summed it up perfectly. That's our number one priority right now, is to make sure our bodies, are changing, and some of these chemicals have a latency, or the cancer from them has a latency period of up to 40 years, so our children could be impacted. As they're older, we don't know. We need to monitor them now, figure out what's here now and what's going to change. But our indoor air monitoring is key as well, because that's where we live, and they haven't tested it.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, the indoor air, I'm just going to... Gotcha. The indoor air monitoring program that was done back in February and into March, I did a bunch of reporting on it back at the time, but it was wholly insufficient, obviously. That's obvious to all of you, but for folks who may not know, that testing was done essentially with, initially it was a contractor of the railroad alongside the EPA. They were using handheld devices called PIDs, photoionization detectors. They are great if you're trying to find really high levels of something, but not great when you're trying to find some of these specific chemicals. Several of the byproducts of vinyl chloride when you set it on fire, like was done here, including hydrogen chloride, phosgene. Those devices are going to have a really hard time finding those, if they find them at all, according to several experts we've spoken with. Formaldehyde is another byproduct. You can only find formaldehyde with that device if it has a special attachment on it. When that attachment's on it, you can't look for anything else. When I've seen dozens and dozens of folks' CTEH home residential tests, haven't seen formaldehyde tested for on a single one of them. So to this day, the EPA is somehow standing behind those tests, despite the fact that we've got several, university professors. Dr. Andrew Welton is one. Other toxicologists and chemists that I'm speaking with. You've got the former, I believe it's Region 2 EPA administrator saying that these tests are not legitimate, but 6 months later the EPA is still saying that they stand behind their air testing that happened indoors in February and March, which is disgraceful, obviously. And now it's to the point where they're kind of still standing behind that to back up kind of a sham cleaning program, if you will, happening right now. I don't know if anyone knows a lot of the details on the cleaning program and wants to talk a little bit about it, about that. I know that's not necessarily affecting folks in Darlington, but on the East Palestine side, that is definitely a concern right now.
It's been a joke. Basically, we've been waiting for at least 5 months for this plan. I've talked to Trish from the EPA. I think she's Ohio EPA. She was in charge of help writing it months ago, and she kind of seemed real flustered with the situation that it was above her head of why we couldn't get this cleaning plan. We've been waiting so long. I've been on a list for months and months and months. I decided I'm going to get out of my lease in my home in East Palestine because my things are contaminated. There's still an odor to me. I still get sick. And when I take those things out, I can't get them clean. No matter what they recommend me to do with dish soap and laundry detergent, it's not getting this smell out. So I I had Sanifec, which is just a regular cleaning company out of Beaver Falls, Ohio. They're not hazmat certified. They came in and Febrezed my home, and they sprayed disinfectant for some reason. And there was still that smell that came back. And this round of cleaning's taken months and months and months for them to plan. We've asked about it several times, and we finally get what they're offering us, and it's just wiping down our counters and vacuuming. Also not hazmat certified, also by some company Norfolk chose. So it's absolutely a sham, and they still haven't contacted me with this list I've been on, even for this. And I decided I can't wait any longer. I don't know what to do with my stuff, so I signed off on it, and I can't wait anymore.
Right.
It's a joke. It's not going to even get these things clean. It's not helping. It's just more stalling.
Right. And
I was going to say, like we talked about earlier today, these chemicals get into the fabrics of your couches, into your mattresses, and it's not going to come out with simple vacuuming or cleaning of the surface of these things. People need to throw away their couches, their mattresses, things like that. These people that are just coming in cleaning the surfaces is just a joke. And then we have the air ducts too. They're not cleaning the air ducts, and we have Scott Smith, the scientist, that has tested people's furnace filters and has found these chemicals in the furnaces. So we know that these air ducts need clean, and they are not cleaning the air ducts in any of these homes. So as soon as winter comes around and you turn your furnace filter on, it's going to be blowing these chemicals right through your house again.
Right.
It's just not sufficient.
Yeah, and it's the fact that their big thing was with this cleaning program. The EPA was saying, due to the concern that many residents have expressed to us about dust in the air, and I laughed when I read it. Not a good laugh, but I laughed when I read it because I was like, that is not the major. Sure, folks might be concerned about dust as one list on the long laundry list of concerns that you all have at this point in time, but dust is not the concern. It's chemicals that are the concern. You're not worried about needing to do a little bit of dusting. I'm sure you would all agree that if they're just going to come vacuum your home, you're happy to just vacuum your home yourself.
Most people already have cleaned their houses by themselves.
Right, which makes a
with no guidance on how to do it or what we're mixing with it, throwing bleach on it. We don't know.
Yeah.
Who knows?
I'm curious on the Pennsylvania side of things. So, we hear a lot about the testing that went on in East Palestine, residential air testing right afterwards. We hear some about water testing and whatnot in East Palestine. But from folks I've spoken with, including Christina, getting and actually including Amanda as well, getting your well tested is a major concern. Has there been any resources available on the Pennsylvania side of things to have your water tested, have your home cleaned, have any air testing done, anything along those lines so far?
For my family, they did have their well tested, only by a local company that was not testing for what we needed them tested for. Scott Smith did come out, tested their soil and their water runoff. So we get this long result sheet. I'm clueless. My main concern is I need somebody to teach us what these mean. So you get these results, you have no idea how to read them. That's a concern, so that's something I'm looking for, is somebody to help anybody in Pennsylvania that needs to know how to read them. As far as cleaning houses, no. When the derailment happened, and they had that 1 mile shrapnel go out, Dr. Chai's office was mandated to close down. My parents are 0.9 miles further down the road. Nobody came to them. Nobody even warned them of an evacuation or a shelter in place. I did. So it's confusing over here in Pennsylvania. You know, he was warned, the people down the street weren't.
Right.
So, no, there has been nothing over here in Pennsylvania to get any kind of help or resources for anybody. And my main concern is the people that aren't on social media.
Yeah.
Like, that's heartbreaking to me.
Right, and you explained that a little bit at the start. So you're here, you've got elderly parents who live in the area. I mean, they would probably have no idea what was going on, because a lot of this, in the early days especially, was information being passed in Facebook groups and all these
Sure.
sorts of places. So I'm sure there's a lot of folks in there in a similar boat who would not necessarily know what was going on.
I know. For also in Ohio, Trumbull and Mahoning counties were also under a shelter in place, and most people had no idea that was going on.
Right. Yeah. And then even now, so it's 6 months later. I'm curious at this stage in the game. So actually earlier today, and this will be in a video that we'll probably publish tomorrow or the next day. Christina was kind enough to take me over to Leslie Run in East Palestine to go look into, frankly, like shockingly still contaminated creeks 6 months later. That you still see it's a little bit harder to necessarily like stir up initially, but rainbow colors in the creeks, similar to what we were seeing back in February and March. You just got to poke around a little bit more. But there's no doubt that the bottoms of a lot of Leslie Run, a lot of Sulphur Run are still fully contaminated in a lot of places, and there's not really a clear plan as to how that's going to be cleaned up. And that's just how it is. It's been 6 months. There's been a bunch of back and forth between Norfolk Southern, the EPA, both of them seemingly dragging their feet as to what to do about that situation. But it's a scary thing because in a lot of cases, Sulphur Run and Leslie run right behind people's houses, literally underneath some people's houses, as Sulphur Run has tunnels going through East Palestine in a lot of places. Either have any of you or folks that you know of when you're in East Palestine, when you're around the creeks, still experiencing any health symptoms, smells, any of that sort of stuff?
Well, I just find it shocking that it's still in the media being portrayed that those creeks are clean, when, as you saw yourself, they're not clean, and saying that the fish kill wasn't brought on by the chemicals that were in the creek.
Right.
So it's just shocking to see that in the newspapers, and the EPA saying that the creeks are clean and they've done their cleanup when clearly they are not cleaned up yet.
Right.
And to build on that, Scott Smith's recent data shows, particularly in Sulphur Run, that the dioxin sampling that has been done so far is insufficient, and it needs to be more thorough and ongoing. He found that the results are actually increasing in Sulphur Run after they started digging under the tracks and doing some stuff with the creeks. So the dioxin levels are actually increasing in Sulphur Run. They dropped for a little bit, but once they started digging, they started going up, and they've been going up. And that result is matches what some people have found in independent tests in their wells as well.
And just for folks who don't know the name Scott Smith is an independent tester who has done a lot of soil testing. He's done furnace filter testing, I believe.
Dioxin testing.
Yeah, he tested Juja's furnace filters. We did a story a couple months back. He also did tests with Candace DeSanzo's furnace filters, and she had kind of a before and after filter as well. And we definitely saw elevated dioxins that were chlorinated as well, indicating that they very likely that those numbers increased after the derailment and the more likely the controlled, not a controlled burn anymore. We know that that's not the case, but the detonation of the vinyl chloride. I guess I wasn't going to necessarily go this way. I'm curious what your reactions were after the NTSB hearing in June, when we kind of learned through hearing from the owners of the actual vinyl chloride themselves, from the company Oxyvinyl, that they were actually recommending to Norfolk Southern that maybe that those cars did not need to be blown up. That was pretty shocking to me. I'm curious some of your reactions. Christina, if you want to start, just what did you think when that all kind of came out?
To me, I think that I had read about a lot into being an open burn. So I wasn't so shocked, it seems, as a lot of people were. But to have somebody actually admit that it didn't need to be done,
Right.
that was shocking.
Heartbreaking.
Yeah.
Frustrated
I mean,
and mad.
it's like we
pissed
knew,
off.
but it was still shocking.
Right. Because, I mean, frankly, obviously, Darlington is probably almost, in some cases, almost more so got some of this bloom than East Palestine in some cases. When you look at the wind directions, when you look at the sediment from the plume maps and whatnot that all came out, a lot of that blew right here over Darlington. Spent a lot of time blowing over Darlington. We've all seen the images, the dark clouds that came up as a result of this. Not clouds, but toxic waste, frankly, up in the air during all of this. And a lot of it settled here in Darlington. Learning that, it's like, would still have played an impact. There would have been an impact. But, man, would it have been way, way, way less of an impact, especially when you're talking 4 miles away, 5 miles away. It would have been a night and day difference. It was unnecessary, is what it seems like. Yeah. I guess Zhuja was part of a Unity Council trip that was over in Washington, D.C. Not super long ago. It was your second trip to D.C., I believe. I'm curious, you got to meet with a handful of different senator's office, representative offices. Do you mind explaining how that trip went, and if you had any successes, stories, or anything that came out of that trip?
Yeah, it was really a fantastic opportunity. It came together very, very quickly. Within a few days, we had a contact that was happened to be a lobbyist in Washington, D.C., and we had a few meetings already lined up with some senators, including Senator J.D. Vance, which I was literally just reading. I think he's in East Palestine tonight. He may speak at the City Hall. And they mentioned in the same article, I was reading about this meeting going on, so I'm kind of hoping maybe he stops in.
Yeah.
But I did meet with him, and felt like that was a very successful meeting. But yeah, we met with I think it was roughly 13 different congressmen mostly senators, but congressmen, and I was able to be in a meeting with the EPA chief of staff and a couple other head people in the EPA. So overall, I felt it was a very successful meeting. A lot of the people we had met with were very sympathetic, and I felt like it was really good human face-to-face connection. I felt like they were empathetic and listening, and a lot of them had been doing a little bit of research into the situation already. But I felt like they truly listened to us, and a few of them have already agreed to write letters of support on behalf of our situation, including PA as well. There was a few that kind of stonewalled us a little bit. I mean, I felt like the EPA maybe a little bit just felt tight-lipped a little bit. And as Jess Conard had said in the meeting, she was there with us, they were giving us canned answers.
Right.
But overall, they were very, I guess, giving. It was one of the busiest days in Capitol Hill, and we had went over our allotted time in several meetings, and J.D. Vance himself actually had left to go vote and then came back to talk to us for another half hour or so, and so that was really great. We're doing some follow-up on some of those meetings now, and like I said, they've already started to write some letters of support on our behalf of our situation and sending them to Biden as well.
Nice, yeah, and I saw right after that trip, I believe Senator Sherrod Brown, did write a letter to President Biden urging him to do something with the far too late letter from Governor DeWine, in my opinion, to ask for a disaster declaration. For those of you watching, it was over a month ago now, probably, that Governor DeWine, the governor of Ohio, finally sent a letter to the Biden administration asking for a disaster declaration in East Palestine. That would free up a lot more financial resources. It would allow FEMA to come in and help, as well as a handful of other things. The letter that was sent was not perfect. The governor of Ohio in it said that there were currently no unmet needs for the community. I can do a very quick, are there unmet needs?
Yeah.
Yes,
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I physically handed the Unity Council set of demands that are very specific of what we needed, including the independent testing. I handed that to Governor DeWine's office when we went to the State House in Columbus, so they had them.
Right. So that was like kind of a frankly ridiculous little thing to include, because technically when you're going to ask for a disaster declaration, there needs to be unmet needs. So while I'm not necessarily surprised that a disaster declaration hasn't been officially signed yet, the thing that kind of is surprising to me is that the Biden administration has not even like said, hey, you need to say there are unmet needs, or hey, we can't sign this because there aren't unmet needs, but we can do this. They've essentially ignored it.
Yeah.
I'm curious, do you have a reaction to that disaster declaration? Number one, taking so long to be written in the first place, and number two, that so far the Biden administration has done nothing with it.
I feel like the media has swayed that a lot, and everything that gets put out there is, oh, everything's fine, the community is fine, look, we're having a parade, look, we're having a carnival, everything's fine here. You know, Norfolk Southern is making it right. And like I said about the cricks, they're saying that the cricks are clean now, and obviously he's saying there's no needs in the community, but yet we're still here saying that we very much have things that we need. We need water still. Most of us are still drinking bottled water.
Right.
So the media very much so plays into that, I believe.
Yeah, when they say unmet needs, I would love to know the list of people they're asking.
Right.
You know, who are you asking? If we have to be transparent, why is that not reciprocated? Who is saying that there's no unmet needs?
Right.
Right.
They have not gone door to door
No.
whatsoever. We had a very small group with FEMA member and CDC, and they got sick and left within 24 hours and have not been back. They have not done the proper assessments and individual assessments that the state is supposed to do to hand in that declaration. Yeah, they haven't gone door to door. How can they say that there are no unmet needs when they've never asked us all?
And to build on that, Z, when you don't make testing available, you don't make resources available, of course there's going to be no data.
Right.
If you don't make them available and you don't allow these people to go get tested and put some peace in the community, you will be able to say there's no unmet needs. But come talk to us.
Right.
We'll tell you our concerns.
Yeah, and I can add to that saying that it is not hard to find people to talk to about this. I mean, at this point in town today, people stop and say, "Oh, like I would want to talk." We met people today, and we're interviewing them tomorrow, and they're like, "Oh, no one else is continuing to talk about this. Like, thank you for continuing to come back." What has the response of the media kind of been in the last couple of months? I know in the beginning this got a lot of media attention, as it should. But it seems like it's been waning with little exceptions. There are still, I'll say News Nation definitely comes back a decent amount and kind of continues to follow up. But have you still been getting interest from a lot of journalists covering this, or has it been waning? I'm curious to hear if folks are actually paying attention at this point.
I don't feel like many people are still paying attention. You know, you don't really hear about anything on the local news unless something like tonight's happening, you know, or a small write-up about how Norfolk Southern is giving money or Norfolk Southern is doing this or that. You're only seeing the positive sides of it. Not that that's even a positive side, you know. Norfolk Southern is putting on a show doing all these things, but they're not actually helping the people. They haven't so much as bought a bottle of water for someone.
Right.
So, yeah. There hasn't been very much in the media anymore at all, except for Cuomo on News Nation is the one that, you know, keeps having people back, and you, of course. But no, there really hasn't been many journalists that have been keeping this alive and in the spotlight.
I want to talk like health concerns for a little bit here. I guess if we don't mind kind of like going down the line, it's okay if you haven't had any. If you have had them, I'm just curious where, you know, if you're still experiencing any sort of symptoms, when, how that might happen, and, you know, how it's kind of changed over time. If you want to go first, Christina.
For me at home, like once in a while you smell a chlorine smell. I still get coughing a lot more at night than during the day. And really, there's a lot of days where I don't even spend at home anymore, because I feel better, even like 5 to 10 miles away, I feel better. I still get a migraine sometimes, but like the coughing at night is the worst. Like, I'll wake up from a sound sleep and it's like I'm choking.
I'm curious, have you or your parents dealt with anything throughout this? Has it gotten better over time, worse over time?
I can say when I was in East Palestine last week for a rock ceremony that Unity Council put on, I said to Christine, I have a killing headache. And I paid attention to it as I drove home out of Ohio, and it eased up. Some say that's a myth. I'm pretty in tune with my body. I can tell when something is induced, and it did smell like chemicals down in East Palestine when we were down there. I haven't smelled so many chemicals lately, my parents, but I did early on.
Right.
So that is a major concern for my elderly parents. My father is compromised, so I'm concerned.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so in the early days, my whole family was sick. It started with the night of the derailment with irritated eyes, nausea, headache, and then when they did the controlled burn, it got 10 times worse, and then included the sore throat, burning nose, felt like you were choking. That continued for several months. Had asthma attacks. My son had asthma attacks. My daughter, and I want to say that my daughter and I were both newly diagnosed with asthma. Never had problems with asthma in our lives. My 4-year-old who has asthma had to change his medications all around because his lungs were so irritated that his medications weren't controlling his asthma. Upset stomach, diarrhea. I had an episode that was seizure-like activity that I was admitted to the hospital for back in May, and that was around the time they were digging up the controlled burn pit. In Darlington, there are definitely days where it smells very strongly of chemicals. On those days, everybody in my house has a headache, upset stomach. So it's very clear to us that we are experiencing symptoms. I mean, especially in the early days, we were very sick. And still to this day, if we're upwind, so downwind, whichever, when they're digging things up, if they dig up a bunch of chemicals, it's in the air and we get sick.
Correct.
Juju, I'll go to you in just a second, actually, but I want to say, too, so I sat down and talked with Amanda earlier today. We did an interview. That interview will be posted on the channel in the next couple days as well. If you're seeing us for the first time right now, an easy way to make sure that you see that and help support us for free is to literally just hit the subscribe button. You can press the bell to get notifications, and anytime we put out new content, you will be the first to see it, basically. And if you want to take it a step further than that, this is our 4th trip back to East Palestine. It's probably still not going to be the last one, unfortunately, based on the stories that we're hearing so far. This is only our 2nd day on the ground here. We're going to be here a good chunk of the rest of the week, and we're going to continue to talk to residents like this. So if you're able to support our independent reporting, we don't take money from corporations or anything like that. We're fully people-powered. It's as little as $5 a month. StatusCoup.com/join is the best way to do that if you want to make sure that we can continue to cover stories like this, cover stories on the ground in Flint, Michigan, like Jordan's been to so many times, Kalamazoo, Jackson, Mississippi, the list goes on, to make sure that you can have independent media out there trying to just get the stories from regular people out there. It might not sound like a lot to do $5 a month, but when a bunch of you all get together and do it, it really makes a difference to make sure that we can make sure to continue to come back to these places because, unfortunately, the media coverage becomes less and less as time goes on. We don't want that to be the case here or anywhere. Juja, sorry to cut you off there, but curious health symptoms that kind of happened earlier on, and then how things have kind of fared and changed over time.
Yeah, so I was forced out of my house about 3 in the morning the night of the derailment because my son and I got very sick very quickly. We weren't told what to look for. I had no idea what, odors, keep in mind or anything. I'm sitting here thinking I'm going crazy. 3 a.m., my son's in bed. I'm on social media texting my neighbors trying to figure out what was going on because at that point we had no information. And then I feel like I start smelling this sweet bleach smell, and I'm like, what is that? I'm not associating it with the fire smoke. I've never been in a big chemical fire before, so I don't know.
We hope nobody is. But
yeah, so I started smelling it, and then within a few minutes I had this horrible headache. If you've ever had a dehydration headache, it feels just like your brain smacking in your skull, and it's very quick and strong. And I started feeling nauseous and very dizzy and disoriented. And I had burning eyes, burning throat, and I'm smelling this smell, getting sicker and sicker, and then within 5 minutes, my son wakes up vomiting out of a dead sleep. He wasn't sick before. I walk into his room, and the smell is stronger in there, and his room's draftier, so it made sense. And, I saw him shaking and throwing up, and, I knew at that time we had to leave, I had got an emergency alert on my phone, an automated one around 11, because I'm like right at that mile marker. But the people next door to me never got it. So it was just in that like weird place. So I thought at the time, the school was the evacuation zone. It was closer to my house than the derailment site. I wasn't thinking about the smoke impacting me like any severe way. Didn't really know what to do. So yeah, we left because we got sick, and then my son felt a little bit better when we got to a hotel about 15-20 miles away in Chippewa, Pennsylvania, that we had evacuated to. He threw up one more time, and then he was okay, and he woke up the next morning, he seemed okay. He did develop some rashes on his arms after a few days, and then they went away. He also keeps getting a rash on his face now, only on his face, and we've never seen it before. And some days it's really splotchy and unexplained, but he's always been really sensitive to stuff. But we haven't changed anything else. But it comes and goes. It's really odd, and it's kind of unexplained, and this doctor can't elaborate on it. And, I've gotten him vinyl chloride testing, and he did test positive, but his doctor couldn't explain anything to me about what it meant or what to do. So that was really frustrating. But otherwise, he's been fine, but I don't bring him into town. And he's been back like twice just for a few minutes at school because it was state mandatory testing. We weren't able to get it anywhere else. So he's been okay for the most part, other than this rash that keeps coming back and going. We don't know if it like triggered an immune kind of thing because we also have, some genetic conditions that make us predisposed, and he's got asthma and some other things. So we don't really know what's going on with this, and we need this medical monitoring ASAP.
Yeah. And the scary thing with all of this, and, just before we got started, a couple of us were just chatting beforehand, and, the scary stuff is what is potentially down the line from now, right? So the health symptoms we're talking about right now are all terrible. No one should be having to deal with this, but the reality of the situation is that vinyl chloride is a carcinogen. Several of the byproducts, when you set vinyl chloride on fire, same thing. This is going to be something that 5, 10, 15 years down the line is going to be when the scary stuff starts to happen.
Yeah.
And it's been shocking to me how the EPA, the CDC, health officials have kind of handled that situation. We were just talking about a meeting that happened, it was probably a month and a half ago, 2 months ago, correct me if I'm wrong, but where the CDC actually had, with the EPA, had kind of a town hall in town here. And an official with the CDC came out and said, we don't know how to remove vinyl chloride from your bodies, but we know how to treat those cancers. And I just couldn't get over just how brazen that was. I mean, maybe maybe that's the most honest thing they've said, I guess.
But then they don't do anything. They won't help us.
Exactly.
They admit that we're sick with the chemical exposure. They know it's related, and they know we're sick. That's the divide in town because people are saying we're making it up. Well, here's the CDC saying, yeah, we know. Oh, well, I guess.
And we'll treat you one day when you get cancer.
Right.
Yeah.
And the thing is right now is that, they're not going to be the ones to treat you right now because you're all on your, hopefully you've got good health insurance or whatever it may be.
Good luck.
Which is something that we've heard some residents talking about, trying to push for something like that. And frankly, I agree with them that there should be some sort of program. And if down the line it does turn, I hope this is not the case and we're all, maybe we are. No, I don't think we're all crazy, but, I hope that in the future something happened and this turns out a lot better. But I'm not optimistic about it. I mean, it's scary to think that, 3 days later, the EPA, all these other federal agencies tell you, yep, it's okay, everything's fine, go ahead, go home, when in reality they did not know the answer to that question. Yeah. They sent everybody back into a very dangerous situation, and very quickly a lot of people got sick. And yeah, there is definitely a divide amongst people who have gotten sick, people who haven't. People who weren't sick early on sometimes got sick later, and vice versa. Husbands and wives who live in the same house and are exposed to the same stuff. One of them might be fine and the other one's getting sick. But everybody's a little bit different. We all react to certain things different ways. If you were exposed to a lot of it early on, maybe you've built up some sort of tolerance or your body's gotten used to it. But that doesn't mean that it's okay at this point. And it's like, well, we're kind of at this point and everything should be fine and it's time to move on. it's scary what the potential prospects are.
We talked earlier. In July, I found an enlarged lymph node in my neck, and it's been growing since then. On ultrasound, it shows as suspicious, and I'm getting a biopsy tomorrow, and that's the fear. Is it going to be a lymphoma from, vinyl chloride poisoning? You just don't know. What's it going to be? And there's that fear, and I'm sure a lot of people have that fear if this is going to be their future. So it's scary.
What's upsetting too is the EPA has research from I think around 2012. They tried to get the threshold for dioxins lowered significantly to I think 3.7 parts per trillion. We're finding higher than that in East Palestine, but they're like, oh, well, it didn't officially go through legally, so we're just going to act like it doesn't exist and we don't know that information. It's despicable.
Yeah, no, and that's not like even the only thing. The EPA, we talked about this a little bit earlier too, but the amount of distrust at this point with the EPA, which I believe is warranted, obviously, but the EPA had a chance early on to kind of make some corrections. They've chosen not to time and time again. They've had a lot of opportunities to change their tune on some of this stuff, and unfortunately, rather than listen to some of the information coming from independent testers, whether that be Scott Smith, whether that be Dr. Andrew Welton, whether that be, we had the Carnegie Mellon and Texas A&M driving around their mobile air monitoring vans. All three of those people that I just mentioned either found levels of contamination that were significantly above the EPA's, or found contamination that the EPA wasn't finding at all. That should be setting off major red flags when, these are all different places, but especially in the case of, you've got Purdue University, you've got Carnegie Mellon, and Texas A&M. These are three highly esteemed universities that, these are the experts in the field, basically. These people also are primarily grant-funded by the United States government. They're kind of like putting themselves out on the line here to criticize, not even to criticize, but to just point out that the EPA's data might be flawed. They have no incentive to point out that the EPA's data might be flawed. And then the EPA essentially turns around, and last week the EPA directly, in an email to me, tried to almost kind of just fully discredit Dr. Andrew Welton's research, saying that he hasn't provided them with enough details, all this sort of stuff. I asked Dr. Andrew Welton about that directly. The response is in an article we posted a couple days ago on the Substack. If you haven't seen it, go check it out. That is not the case, and they're essentially going through and not only not looking at some of this information the right way, but they're trying to discredit some of these legitimate experts.
Well, Carnegie Mellon's plume map and the EPA plume map are honestly pretty similar for the little clip that the EPA has shown us, which I think is only like a 10-hour span. But their information is pretty similar with the plume map, and that shows that PA was heavily targeted, and there's still nothing changed.
Right. To add to this too, this isn't even the U.S. EPA at this point, but we actually reached out to the Ohio EPA with the Freedom of Information Act request to try to get communications between the Ohio EPA, the governor's office, and Norfolk Southern from the kind of, especially the early stages of this. And ordinarily when we do these Freedom of Information Act requests, if they don't want to do it, generally they will provide us with a really high quote, because you have to pay for them sometimes. Sometimes they'll give them to you, but if it's an instance where they don't want to necessarily show, they might quote you, $500, $800, something like this, to get all of the emails and communications back and forth. Rather than doing that, we fully were denied today access to communications between the Ohio EPA, the governor's office, and Norfolk Southern during the early days of the controlled the detonation and the derailment. So again, if you want people to trust you, again, that's Ohio EPA, not U.S. EPA, but U.S. EPA has done their fair share of answering emails and questions very vaguely, not being on the up and up with everything. Obviously, we talked about other issues they've had early on, but if you want transparency and you want people to trust you, just sharing your communications between the company and, who caused all these issues in the first place and you, seems like it'd be a pretty easy place to start.
Yeah.
Well, that's what I'm worried about over here in Pennsylvania, the DEP.
Right.
We're talking a whole different agency who has not been transparent. I've gone to these roundtable meetings, and they treat you like you have no clue of what you're talking about.
Yeah.
So I know there was a recent report released by the FRA, which is the Federal Railroad Administration. They're one of the groups I met with on my first trip to D.C. I met with them, I guess they are representatives, but I think the guy's name was Tristan Brown with the DOT. He's right below Pete Buttigieg. So I met with them, the FRA, and also PHMSA. They work with hazardous materials, but we talked about I'm sorry, my brain just
you're
totally shorted out. I know I was giving too much information.
Oh,
there.
you're fine. We can come back to it if you want. Also,
Please do.
yeah. No,
Please
for
do.
sure. I'm curious on the Pennsylvania side. So they were having some sort of meetings about it. So it's DEP for Pennsylvania. And that's another issue with all of this because it happened on a state line.
Exactly.
It's kind of divided and conquered everybody. Did you get your thought
Yeah,
back?
I did.
I'll let
I'm
you
sorry.
finish.
Okay, so because I know I wanted to touch base on that meeting too, but
Yeah.
the point I wanted to say just now is the FRA had recently released a 140-page report about Norfolk Southern safety, and they mentioned it being a communications issue and an issue with management within the company about our situation. So we're also having a virtual follow-up meeting with those same agencies this upcoming Friday. So I would be interested to have the FRA elaborate on that report about Norfolk Southern.
Right. So they're saying Norfolk Southern has major communication issues, and that's part of what
Yeah.
potentially led to this situation
Yeah.
here. Well, sorry to interrupt right there. I wanted to make sure we got Judy's thought there. So Pennsylvania DEP has had some meetings. Has the Pennsylvania DEP provided any specific testing or anything, or are they just providing information, basically?
Just information.
And when they're providing information, you're running into similar issues that other folks are having, I would imagine, as far as understanding all of the information and not having correct questions answered. I'm curious how some of those interactions have gone.
Well, they've gone good to a point. When I did question the DEP here at one meeting, they were testing farms around locally, and all he would pretty much say to me was, everything is fine. I don't know what you're talking about. Here it is. These farmers have given us access to their properties. We've tested. It's ongoing. Until we reach a point, they would test for a mile, then go out another mile. If they didn't find anything, they would stop. But why are we just testing farms? Why? Because of the livestock, which I'm fine with.
Right.
But it makes me question again the crowd.
Right.
Like it's so narrow-minded. These people are who we want to talk to because this is good PR.
Right.
We're not going to go over here and talk to these people because we've seen and heard that they're not happy.
Right.
No, I talked to the DEP too, and they said the same thing. They were only testing farms, and they had tested up to 5 miles out. And when I let them know, like, I have a small, like, not necessarily farm, but I raise chickens and ducks, and that's my primary source of eggs. Like, that, we don't buy eggs from the store, and it's a concern because chickens eat off the ground. So they pick up soil. And then they lay their eggs,
Right.
and then we're eating those eggs, and it's just a concern. And he said, "Well, yeah, that's a concern. You know, you might. For now, we're saying that it's safe to do that, but they don't know." And
For now, we're saying that
he
they
said,
can do that.
I'll put you on a list to come get your soil tested," but we never heard back, and, you know, calls went unanswered. So, you know, the DEP on our side, even, we're not getting calls returned, or you get put on a list and then nobody shows up at your house to do the soil testing. So,
Yeah, I feel
I've had a
like
little bit of a
Pennsylvania-
different, you know, aspect for that. We just haven't heard back, and we were on a list.
Right.
Yeah, I feel like the agencies are good at pacifying you, telling you what they think you want to hear.
Right.
And then passing the buck to someone else
And then,
say it's not
or
my
not at all, or not at all.
Right.
You know, these lists disappear. If I worked for an agency and I tell you I will get in contact with you, I will get in contact with you.
Right.
Why are people not upheld to what they're promising the community? And they want to know why everybody's so angry, and why don't we trust these agencies? This is a prime example why.
Right.
We would love to trust the agencies. We would love all to work together and be like, okay, I'm good. I'm going to back off. That is not what it is.
Right.
Absolutely. Yeah, the plume map shows very clearly that Pennsylvania was heavily impacted. I think it was Mark Durno in one of the meetings in East Palestine. He talked about Pennsylvania had the fallout from the plume heavily in Pennsylvania. And the fact that we're just ignoring that. After I evacuated to Chippewa, which is in Pennsylvania, we left again the day of the intentional burn because there was a wall of black smoke outside my son's grandmother's house, who was right next to our hotel. So we evacuated with her further into Pennsylvania at that point. And I've shown pictures to, I think it was the DEP at one event that there was in town, and, I sent them to him. I said, we saw that there, they need testing, my son goes to his grandmother's house all the time. She's got health problems, she needs, to be made sure that plume didn't stay there because we saw it, we know it was there.
Right. I'm just going to do one more question because I know you all are looking to get into this meeting that's going to be getting started in a couple minutes here, but if there was one thing that you wish the lawmakers in the area or folks could do to actually help, I mean, there hasn't been any legislation passed at all since this. Are there specific things you're hoping to get from lawmakers to either help your specific case here or at least try to help somebody else in the future, or any final thoughts you might have for us tonight?
I think Biden really needs to make the declaration for East Palestine to get the help that they need. And then these railroad safety acts need to go into place to hold the railroads accountable, where they have, 2 conductors on a train. They need to have enough crew members on a train. They can only be carrying so many chemicals per train, spaced out, and so many cars per train. They really need to look into the rail industry. Norfolk Southern has a train derailed every 7 days, and there's a train derailment every 3 days in the United States. So we really need to look at our railroad systems. A lot of these date back to, I heard Civil War era. It's ridiculous. They need updated. We just really need to talk about the railroad systems in the United States. And then other than Biden really declaring a declaration so that we can get the help that we need. And then in Pennsylvania, we just need our legislators to step up and get us the help that we need in Pennsylvania, because so far we've had nothing.
Yeah, I absolutely think they need to declare an emergency or disaster as soon as possible. And I think they also need to get money out of politics, because the politicians help enable these corporations to put profit over people consistently, and it's not sustainable. If we don't hold these corporations who are poisoning us accountable, nothing's going to change. They recently fined, I think it was OSHA maybe, fined $49,000. That's nothing.
Big whoop for
Drop in the
for Norfolk
bucket.
Southern.
Yeah, and OSHA also said that the cleanup workers on the tracks need to have some health care too, and they're doing some other things, but they're not offering that to the residents.
Right. Any final thoughts over here?
No, I'm just hoping that if anybody, a resident of any surrounding community, reaches out to a legislator, that they take the time to acknowledge them, either by email, by a phone call. I think if people are able to talk, you can calm the waters.
Yeah, we
So,
need to be represented.
yes.
We need to be asked our opinion, because they're not talking to all of us, and it's a very select few, and it's not representing.
Right.
No, I feel like overall, everybody in this situation has not been represented. There's been a small group maybe of them who have been, but we've reached out to representatives over and over and over again, and we just get put down by them and dismissed. And then some of them now at this point won't even talk to some of us, even if we still come to them and we're saying the same thing, or we might be saying something a little bit different now, but they still just ignore you.
Right.
Or at the very beginning, I had a representative here in Darlington tell me that just because you saw a black plume of smoke go over your house didn't mean you were affected. So it's just, they're so dismissive, and it's not just the representatives, it's the environmental protection agencies too. They're supposed to take care of the environment and take care of the people, and instead it seems like they're taking care of Norfolk Southern and their billions of dollars.
It can happen anywhere. That's the next problem, is how do you escape this pattern that we obviously see happening? How do we change it? What do we do?
Right.
Just come and walk and talk with us. That's all we would like. Just
Yeah, honestly.
meet us. We're good people.
Well, I appreciate the 4 of you, the 5 of you taking the time. Edward, we'll let you run away now. You don't have to sit here anymore. Seriously, thank you all so much for taking the time. Yeah, I really appreciate it. Definitely keep us posted with what happens in the meeting here. I'm going to keep talking for a little bit, John. I'll do a little wrap up. You all can go ahead and head
Thank
inside.
you.
Thank you all so much for taking the time. For folks watching still, too, definitely smash the like button to help get this out to more folks. I'm going to go over a couple things that we have going on over the next couple days while we are still here on the ground. Right now, like I said, we're just outside of East Palestine, Ohio, in Darlington. If you're seeing us for the first time right now, too, please hit the subscribe button down below. I believe we're close to 149,000 subs on YouTube now. We'd love to get over that threshold while we are still here on this trip. And again, super chats, I will read any super chats that we got at the end of this stream. Just to give you an idea of what we've been up to so far on this trip. This morning we met with a new resident. We didn't do a video interview, but we will be working on putting out a new story with information that she gave us. She is actually somebody who has indoor air testing that shows contamination. This is somebody who was working with Professor Andrew Welton early on, and we actually have the full test results from this resident that we will be able to publish in full. This is the person in the report from Dr. Welton in a story we broke last week. The EPA is saying that they cannot assess Professor Welton's claims because they don't have this person's information. This person initially wanted to remain anonymous. After our conversation today, she's willing to put her name on this so that, hopefully it makes the EPA take a second look at Dr. Welton's claims. It's frankly bullshit that they're not looking at his claims to begin with. Dr. Welton is highly esteemed. The former Region 2 administrator for the federal EPA said so much in an interview with a local news station last week. You also don't become a Purdue University professor without being highly esteemed in the field. He's got several grant-funded research papers, all this sort of stuff. So we will be releasing that full report sometime in the next couple days. After that, we met with who was our second interview we met with today? Jeez, the day is becoming a blur. Later on, we met with resident Amanda, who we just talked with right here. Amanda went through in a lot more detail some of the health concerns that she's had over the last several months with this. She was having, seizure-like symptoms. She's never experienced this before. So that interview we posted over the next couple days and is frankly shocking, some of the information that she went through with us there. We have a ton scheduled tomorrow. I think we have something like 8 different interviews scheduled for the day tomorrow with many residents that are going to be new to Status Coup, sharing different stories. We also met with Christina, and we actually went into Leslie Run today, and we showed chemicals in the creeks that in some places look just as bad as they did back in February. The full kind of chemical rainbow cloud in the water after flipping over a couple rocks there. Ridiculous that these creeks are still this contaminated literally 6 months later at this point in time. So that was today. Again, tomorrow we've got a lot going on, and then we're looking to have a live stream tomorrow night around the same time. Should be about 6:30 with resident Candace DeSanzo. Candace is in the unfortunate situation right now where she is part of that home cleaning program that's going on in East Palestine. She has been relocated for months at this point, and now she is on the list. She essentially, is running out of options. She's got the cleaning going on later this week, and she will be forced to move back into her home. Both her and some of her children have had health symptoms, even fairly recently, especially, at one point a couple months ago, her son, after spending just a couple hours in East Palestine, needed to go to the ER for a second time. He also went earlier in the year, too, closer to February when this derailment happened. So we'll hear directly from Candace about the situation that she's going through. And frankly, this whole thing is it's still a big mess. It's still a big mess. The fact that these people are 6 months later needing to deal with this, needing to fight tooth and nail for basic things, for a proper test in their home. And instead of having these proper tests done and these basic things done, agencies like the EPA, companies like Norfolk Southern are saying, oh, we're not going to test your house again. Don't worry about that. But we will have somebody come in and dust and vacuum for you. As if those are the concerns that people are worried about. Blows my mind. If you want to make sure that we can continue to do this on the ground reporting, the only way to do so is by becoming a member of Status Coup, statuscoup.com/join for as little as $5 to $10 a month. It might not sound like a lot, but it makes a big difference. And I can tell you that residents like Candace, like Christina, like Zhuzha, appreciate it when folks actually get out here and try to get their stories out here, because at this point in time, not many people are doing it. Not many people are doing it. It's absolutely a disgrace that, again, 6 months later, the help is nowhere to be found. They're not here. They're not coming. The cavalry's not coming for these folks. That is not how this situation should be unfolding. Excuse me. Last thing I'll cover is Wednesday night. We're going to have a big live stream. There will be an event going on, hoping to have a couple dozen residents in attendance. Many of them will be speaking. We'll be able to do interviews with a whole bunch of them. So that will be another big live stream on Wednesday night. Again, if you're not subscribed to us here on Status Coup, please be sure to do so. With that, John, do we have any super chats or anything coming in? If not,
only those with money get represented.
Gotcha. So Fly Chomper Fly, thank you very much. Only those with money get represented. Thank you, Fly Chopper Fly. I know we see you in the super chats a lot. That is much appreciated. Again, those of you who joined us for this tonight, thank you so much for watching. Lots of new content coming over the next couple of days. If you see some of our East Palestine stuff coming out right here, please help us out. Share it on YouTube, share it on Twitter, your other social media, whatever you use, and help get it out there, because frankly, you know, there's going to be a bunch of bullshit in the news about Trump indictments and all this other stuff. Ignore that. John just said ignore that. Listen to John. Ignore that. No, I mean, some of this stuff is important, right? But what is more important than people who have done nothing wrong, who are now being at risk of cancer and all sorts of other things because some company screwed up in their small town and a bunch of government agencies are letting them get away with murder? What is more important than that? If we can let this happen in the U.S., if this is what can happen, and we just let this slide, and Norfolk Southern gets away with a couple fines here and there and a slap on the wrist, imagine what they can get away with next. This can happen, as you just said at the end of that, this could happen anywhere. There are railroad tracks that run through small towns across the United States. This is not something that only happens here. This could happen in your backyard, and you want to make sure that it is taken seriously when it happens near you, and that you do not need to go through what these people have gone through. With that, I am going to wrap this up. Thank you all so much for watching. Again, stay tuned throughout the week. If you can become a member, statuscoup.com/join is the place to do so. It makes a big difference. These trips are not cheap. John and I needed to fly out here, rental car, hotel, the whole shebang. But you can't do this stuff in one day. You can't do this stuff remotely all the time. We do the best we can when we can remotely. But frankly, we would not be able to continue to have the relationships that we have with residents in town if we had not spent, weeks and weeks and weeks on the ground covering this story.